Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our June presentation. Now, this is the third one which we've done by a Skype recording. Again, the whole COVID situation is driving us towards this. Hopefully, you're all nice and well, and we'll see you as soon as we can get a physical meeting. Now, most of our speakers that we've had will also be doing physical meetings for us in the future. Tonight's talk is a presentation by somebody who was more interested in doing this talk in person to get more of the interaction. To give that interaction, Matt and Kate will be asking some questions at various points which they feel pertinent. It's not something we normally do, so it's not like it's going to be a normal sort of questions and answer session. But for this talk, it's the way that we're going to run it because that's the best way for it. So moving on to tonight's talk, as you can see from the screen in front of you, the talk is called Rhinos in Crisis. Now, the talk is given to us by somebody who many of you will know his name, if not his face, and you'll know he's more associated with the study of amphibians. We've got the pleasure tonight of having a talk from Darrell Lott. Now, Darrell has been recently doing a lot of work with rhino crisis and rhino conservation. And his talk is on basically what he's doing there and what the situation is. So on that, I shall now pass you over to Darrell to give you his talk. Enjoy, everybody, and thank you, Darrell.
All right, so just obviously thanks to everybody for joining the talk. Obviously, it's a shame we can't get on with anything with COVID-19, but I'm going to try and bring across what I possibly can, obviously bringing out emotion, hopefully within the presentation rather than physically. Hopefully we can explore that a bit further on when I'm actually at one of your meetings and we can sort of do it more justice. So we'll start off with the first slide, which is just going to be a brief introduction with regards to rhinos themselves. So there we go, we've got a selection there just sort of talking about what the rhino wild populations. 5 species of rhinos throughout the world at this moment in time. As you can see on the screen there, 4 out of the 5 are classified as endangered in some shape or form. 3 of them critically endangered. And basically, if you can sort of put that into perspective as to the numbers in relation to the amount of countries you can see there as to where they are found. So it's quite a large amount of areas, for instance, with white rhinos. The most amount of white rhinos will be found in South Africa, but also can be found in small clusters in countries such as Kenya, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe and Uganda. Also, obviously seen in Swaziland, which is pretty much within South Africa. And again, populations are growing within Botswana as well. So black rhinos, another species that are living predominantly in South Africa. And again, they are also present within certain areas throughout Africa, pretty similar to that of white rhinos as well. So you've got Javan rhinos as well, which are critically endangered. And to be honest with you, that really could change that status again soon as well. Numbers are slowly on the decline. Obviously, that may sound sort of a much better scenario than saying they're rapidly declining. But obviously, as you can see there is literally 65 to 70 estimated. So if you want to sort of try and make it look a bit rosier and say there are under 100 Javan rhinos left within the wild, which is a steady decline over the last 10 to 15 years. And again, that's a species that really there's little known about. Javan rhinos are very secretive throughout Indonesia. And there's a lot of research been sort of taken and advanced there. With Save the Rhino, who I know doing a lot of work there with the Javans and the greater one-horned rhinos as well. So moving on to those, there's about 3,500-ish. They're classed as vulnerable, and they're mainly found in India and Nepal. Nepal even, I can't speak. And and you also find their numbers are on the rise, which is a good thing. As you can see, the numbers still aren't exactly terrific, but we've got to look at the positive of that, is that the numbers are rising. We move down finally to Sumatran rhinos, and again there's around 80, so we'll round it up to 100 just to sort of make it sound a bit better, but they are again critically endangered. Again, another very secretive species, but also, you know, the situation with Sumatran is as bad as it is with any other species. Now, I want to sort of stress that, yes, the white rhino is classified as near threatened and not endangered, but this isn't a fair reflection on their situation at this moment in time, and that I will feature a lot more in the next coming slides. So we'll move on from standard background history of the wild populations. So my main focus is going to be on South African rhinos. That's where I sort of focus on with regards to visiting and sort of doing my studies mainly on South African rhinos. So South Africa is home to about 22,000 rhinos, with an estimated 5,000 rhinos in Kruger National Park. And the majority of rhinos do live within private reserves. So that is not including the national parks. Private reserves are small reserves that may have small clusters of the animals with regards to focusing on conservation work for them. A lot of them are bought and bred, and a lot of sort of money is made in between South Africa itself with regards to switching bloodlines, that sort of thing. Again, very similar to maybe something like a cat or a dog, where you're sort of trying to get good genetics made out of species, hence reserves getting involved, and money is exchanged with regards to actually moving males to males and females to females throughout different reserves. So you're looking at, as I said, there's about 5,000 within Kruger National Park, and that is, again, that's an estimated. The issue that we find with national parks, they tend not to officially publish populations. The reason for that, it may sound like they're trying to cover up maybe something, you know, something criminal. The main reason why they do it is to relieve sort of any sort of interest in poachers, or sort of decrease interest in poachers, mainly because, you know, if you're going to say you've got 1,000 rhinos within a very small area, it's going to encourage poachers to sort of come to the reserve and attempt to take what they can get. So for that reason, they don't state exactly how many they have. So we're looking at mainly today why they're in crisis and what the fuss is all about. Now, rhinos they possess something that is highly prized, which we wouldn't necessarily think would be. It's something that is iconic to the rhino, and it's, you sort of look at that animal, it's the one thing that is the impressive element of that animal, and that is the horn of the rhino. And the horns can grow beyond 1 meter in length, especially with white rhinos. They have the 2 horns on the top, as do blacks, and you find the white and the black rhinos, their horns can grow equally in length. As you saw in the first picture, with rhinos in crisis, there was a picture of Bob on there. He's an iconic rhino from one of the national parks, and as you can see by his 2 horns, again I can show you that picture a little bit later on, both his horns are very similar size, and again that's a very common feature with black rhinos. So the horn is a very prized possession throughout Asia, China, Vietnam especially, and sort of you're probably wondering why that is such an iconic feature and why it is heavily prized. So it's thought that it contains medicinal properties. It's something that is completely false, and it's something that it's a myth, and that again is a very old myth that supposedly is thought contains medicinal properties. It's sort of shared throughout Asia, and it's believed to cure literally anything that you can think of. So there's a little selection there of supposable things it can cure, something as sort of serious as cancer to something as ridiculous as a hangover. And there's literally a few ones I've put in there as well which you think would be ridiculous, but again, you could even go to sort of the modern day now. This presentation was written about a month ago, it's finished, and even now with COVID-19 coming into play, That's even been added in there now, people saying that it's believed to cure COVID-19. So then that's obviously something that is really putting the rhinos at strain at this moment in time. So it's something that is, to us, it sounds ridiculous, it really does, but it's something that is a myth, and it's something that has been passed down generation to generations, and therefore is something that their culture truly believes actually does have some form of medicinal property. So basically the horn is a form of keratin, and we do possess keratin ourselves. So we have hair, we have our fingernails as well. And they're all made of exactly the same thing as the horn. The horn is a very, very light part of the body. If you were to pick it up, you'd sort of forget you'd actually holding the item. It is very, very light. And it obviously regrows as well, just like your nails and just like your hair does. It regrows very quickly. You're looking at, if the horn is to be removed, you would say that that horn will probably regrow about half the length it originally was within that year. So it does grow incredibly quickly. It's something that, as I said, it is heavily prized, and it's very appealing to the Asian market. I mean, keratin, as I said, it is purely fingernails and hair. It doesn't sort of, when they sort of look to use it, it doesn't sort of contain any form of taste or anything like that. It's purely just a substance. So it is added to some sort of it's ground down, and it's used, you could almost say, a bit like salt, and it sort of flavors a drink of some sort, and that sort of is used to drink. It's also used to make into lotions as well, so you can rub it onto certain areas of your body. If maybe you've got a cut, or I don't know, you've got a headache, and sort of rub it on your forehead or something along those lines. Supposedly it's supposed to sort of to heal you, and you know, it's supposed to do something like that according to the Asian market and Asian culture, which we know scientifically is not true. Keratin is purely keratin. It's as good as supplying them with our fingernails. It would do the same job, but do absolutely nothing. So now I want to move on to a story of a private reserve that I work at in South Africa. Visit as frequently as I possibly can to help out with the crisis that is in place at this moment in time. So I'll leave it with you just for a couple of minutes, and feel free to have a watch.
Would you know my name if I saw you in heaven? Would it be the same if I saw you in heaven? I must be strong and carry on, 'cause I know I don't belong here in heaven. Would you hold my hand if I saw you in heaven? Would you help me stay if I saw you in heaven? I'll find my way through night and day, 'cause I know I just can't stay here in heaven. Time can bring you down, time can bend you Beyond the door, there's peace, I'm sure, 'cause I know there'll be no more tears in heaven. Would you know my name if I saw you in heaven? Would it be the same if I saw you in heaven? I must be strong and carry on, 'cause I know I don't belong here in heaven. 'Cause I know I don't belong here in heaven.
We've got a couple of questions for you, Daryl, if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
go for it.
Okay, the first one, obviously we brought up right at the very start, and it's the current situation with COVID-19. Is this having any effects on current conservation efforts out in South Africa for the rhinos?
Yeah, it's disastrous. Putting it sort of really bluntly, and there's no exaggeration to that at all. So a good example is the reserve. I work for one, I go there. You find that they solely rely on what I would call foreign income. So they host college events. They allow colleges and universities to study there. Volunteers who pay to be there to help the reserve. And obviously, at this moment in time, with what's going on at this moment, and with travel bans, that sort of thing, nobody is visiting the reserve. They just, nobody's allowed to visit the reserve. The country is very strict on rules with regards to COVID-19. That means the reserve is literally living on scraps. What they've got left in the bank is meant to last them potentially until this time next year, hopefully sooner, when they're allowed to have people come back to the reserve safely. Obviously, that is the most important thing, so it's not spread on to any of the reserve staff. But they've literally got zero income. So at this moment in time, they reckon they've got about 3.5, maybe if they're lucky, 4 months worth of income that will pay for all of the staff who are on the reserve at this moment in time, which I believe is 21 off the top of my head. And yeah, they're all played valuable roles, right? Sort of going down to the guys, the conservation chaps who maintain the reserve every day. They'll do sort of look after the roads. They'll check the fence line, electric fencing, you name it, they do it. They're the grafters. They do everything. They're like the unsung heroes, really, of the reserve. And then obviously you've got the main guys who are the APU, the anti-poaching unit. So they are pivotal with regards to looking after the rhinos and keeping them safe. Obviously, without money there to pay their wages, as dedicated as those guys are to their job, and they would stay and do their job, but they can't support their families without an income. think again, it was around 130 people are dependent on that money for income. Some of these people have families of 10, 15, and they all live off that one income that comes from the reserve. So it's a case of, you know, they've got to try and find ways of making money themselves, or try and find a job, you know, a cash in hand job or something like that, to try and pay some sort of, so they can pay their way in some shape or form. They've got a home at the reserve and they're entitled to stay there and they're allowed to stay there. But the problem is they've got families. They can't feed their families. Then obviously they've got to look elsewhere, and that is the real negative for the reserve. The rhinos are at real risk. The staff, the main staff and the management obviously are quite happy to work for zero pay as long as their food's covered. That's how dedicated the guys are. But obviously the issue is the guys who do the anti-poaching work at night time are irreplaceable. They are required, and without any funding whatsoever, obviously it's potentially disastrous, meaning that fence lines aren't patrolled. There's no money to do driven patrols, anything like that. Meaning that the rhinos at this moment in time, more than any time that they can ever think of, are at real risk, and it has proved already how serious it really is, and God forbid anything does happen to the reserve. But I know local national parks, one that is local to the reserve I'm talking about now, has lost a substantial amount of rhinos within the last sort of, I think it's 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks since the travel ban in South Africa. They've lost more rhinos than they had lost in the last, I think it was 8 months the year before. So they're looking at potentially triple, maybe quadruple the amount of poached rhinos last year. So we're looking at potentially maybe 3,500 to 4,000 rhinos being poached this year throughout South Africa. So that's how it is.
I have a question for you. This is like the prosecutions. Do you have an authority, or the police to do it, or is it the rangers that go out looking for evidence for poachers? And if they find the poachers, are there any successful prosecutions against them? What happens to them?
So, as we all know, from obviously what you see on the news and what you hear of South Africa, it's a very, very controversial country. Racism is a big thing within the country, and it's not just towards. It works both ways. You know, it's both ways it works, which is not pleasant to see. But with regards to prosecutions, unfortunately, race does become something that does come into play. And you find the issue with prosecutions, you find that evidence, yes, it's collected, but it's also with regards to, there's a lot of obviously corruption within South Africa, going all the way up to the government as well. And you'll find that, like you just saw in that video there, about police were there to gather and create a case. We had a situation there back when they were poached. Again, I'll just elaborate on that, which you didn't actually see in that video. When we had rhinos poached there, back, I think it was 6 years ago now, we had a situation where we had the police come in, they took evidence and that sort of thing, and the case was instantly quashed. Basically, they dismissed it and said that evidence had been lost, and it wasn't worthy of being carried out and looked into, meaning that they didn't even offer to help with any form of doing post-mortems, that sort of thing. That was done by some of the guys on the reserve, which is obviously horrifically traumatic for the guys. But regards, as you said, jumping back to the prosecution side of things, 9 out of 10 times you'll find the poachers, if they're caught, wriggle out of it, and nothing happens. And jail sentences are minimal. You might find they might get a very small fine, something like that. But basically, reserve owners are like vermin when it comes to local villages and townships who have the poachers present. Obviously, they have a lot of backing. But what we also need to remember as well is it's not just rhinos on that reserve that suffer from poaching. The rhino crisis is horrific, and I will elaborate on it further later on. But obviously, meat poaching is a thing as well, and especially during COVID-19, meat poaching has really picked up. So obviously there's a lot of hungry people about within the townships, and you'll find snares being laid, and you'll find that people are trying to get into reserve at night times to sort of shoot and kill. So we have a lot of antelope on the reserve, wildebeest, kudu, eland, blesbok, impala, you name it, they've pretty much got them. They're all heavily prized or highly prized to meat poachers. So one of them can feed that family for a month, maybe even more than that. So for them, it's worth the risk. The issue that the reserve have got with regards to catching poachers to then get them prosecuted, as I said, it gets quashed and nothing happens. You can catch one and we have no authority to hand them into the police. The police have got no interest whatsoever in helping out a reserve that wants to punish poachers. There's a lot of police officers who have got links to poaching and obviously wanted to continue because they are paid off basically. And I imagine they are fed from those animals as well that have been poached. So the reserve now, what they have to do is they have to work out the ways that they can deter poachers from being there. And that involves the patrols that we do night and day. So we'll have nighttime workers do driven patrols, fence lines in the middle of the reserve, just basically showing a presence. It's not, the idea is not to catch the actual poach necessarily. That's obviously a bonus if they do, but it's a deterrent. It's to deter people from, to deter the poachers from entering the reserve to try and achieve what they want to. And I'll slowly stress that this is meat poachers. Rhino poaching is a completely different kettle of fish. But again, heading back to, as you quite rightly said, about the prosecution factor, we've had to sort of go down the lines of improvising now. And basically the APU, the anti-poaching unit, if they find tracks and they manage to hunt down a poacher and they manage to find a poacher, they are armed now with dogs. They have a Belgian Malinois and they have two, my mind's just gone, German Shepherds as well, or Alsatian should I say. And they'll quite happily follow them with them and try and scare them off. If they're on the reserve themselves, there's a little saying that is said now. It's if we find a poacher, we'll interrogate them, and what we say is the APU do what the APU do, and that usually pretty much means they'll batter them and then chuck them out. And that's pretty much what happens. Let the dogs have a bit of fun, and then they'll chuck them out, basically deterring them from coming back. That is the idea. We can't actually prosecute, but we can physically, to a point, stop them from coming into reserve. So that is our way of prosecuting. It's the only way we can do anything as a deterrent with any means of force. They have trespassed at the end of the day, looking to take something off the reserve. So we have to respond in some way, shape or form.
So I think he touched on it in that video. So could they not cut off the horns like you know the people who work with the rhinos and make it legal for the sale of this and completely just the market fall to pieces because it's then legal? Yeah,
I mean, when it comes, as you quite rightly said, about removing the horn, obviously, as you quite rightly said, I touched on it within that last video just there. A few videos a bit further down, we'll talk about it. There's a little bit more detail there from one of the main guys who helps out, one of the vets, who explains it and explains it a lot better than I can. He could do that in 30 seconds. It'll probably take me half an hour. So we'll let him do that. But regards to the actual removing of the horn, as you quite rightly said, it is something that is done by some national parks, but it's not something that is widely carried out throughout South Africa yet. But yeah, I mean, we can discuss that a little bit further on. There's a couple of slides relating to it there with regards to pros and cons, that sort of thing. So we will plough through this, and we can sort of discuss that there if that's all right with you.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Cool. Yeah, carry on with the presentation.
Perfect, cool. Right, so beyond that, I'm now going to elaborate a bit further on from the actual rhinos that were affected by the poaching on the reserve, which you just unfortunately saw on that last presentation there. So starting with the first two, two rhinos, one's called Cheeky Cow, who you can probably imagine quite rightly got her name from being one of these most mischievous rhinos you'll ever meet. I was very lucky. 2011, 2012, I visited the reserve for the first time as a college student. Sorry, I should say university student, and I was doing a lot of research work on the rhinos, more specifically Cheeky Cow and another lovely rhino called Patrol. And obviously Cheeky Cow passed away, was poached, and you look at that animal there, and you spend 2 weeks studying that animal solid, and then you get their message through that that animal has been poached, and I can't describe the words. You know, I didn't have any words. You know, there was no way of describing how that felt after hearing that something that you had dedicated so much time into. I mean, I only done it for 2 weeks. You think of the guys who have been there for years who had to sort of deal with that situation. So a Cheeky Cow, the situation is horrific. You know, you just see pictures of what she was left to deal with, and how it happened, and the pain that animal must have suffered. So you can see there, just sort of going back to her, bit of information about her. She was a young female, young adult female, and it was her first calf, called Charlie. So Cheeky Cow was the actual rhino who was poached. Only one rhino out of the entire reserve was actually poached, although others were targeted. Cheeky Cow was caught on the fence line and was shot several times, once in the head, once on the hind leg, and once on the neck. Basically, she was disorientated and stressed, obviously incredibly scared, as was Charlie, the youngster, who obviously witnessed this fully. As soon as that animal was shot and was disorientated and movement wasn't brilliant, obviously a rhino is a massive animal, and I've done work alongside rhinos, sort of sitting next to them when they've been under anaesthetic, and I can't describe actually how big those things are. They are enormous. So for a poacher to confront that animal, even if it was slightly injured but stressed out of its wit, then obviously you can imagine just how violent and dangerous that sort of position must be for poachers and for the rhinos. So poachers will get in. They severed the spinal cord, but a massive slit through the spinal cord, which paralysed Cheeky Cow, meaning that she couldn't really move. She had no control over her body, and this is the perfect opportunity for the poachers to take off the horns, and that's me wording it really politely. When I say take off, it is butchered off, and that's not even, I'm not exaggerating, it is absolutely horrific. The way in which it happens, you'd think, oh, surely they'd just shoot the animal and cut it off, but they have to do it quick. Now poachers obviously aren't wealthy. Money is obviously an issue for them, so they have to use whatever they've got. So machetes, axes, hacksaws, anything that they can get their hands on with that is relatively quiet, they will use to hack off that animal while it is still alive. I want to stress that this animal isn't killed and then taken off. This animal has its horn removed while it is still living. So you can imagine, you know, having an axe going through your nose while you're alive. You can imagine the severe pain you would be in losing that. Now you'll find with rhinos, as you saw in some of those horrific pictures earlier on, it's taken off in any way, shape or form. They don't care if it rips an eye socket out, whether it takes, you know, the lips off or the gums of the animal. They just want to get as much of that horn as they can, so they will dig down right into the skull, right into the brain, and they will take off as much of that horn as they possibly can. Every single inch of that is worth money, and it's worth a lot of money. That's $6,000, something like that per kilo, which is an insane amount of money. Her Cheeky Cow was well and truly butchered to death, and it might sound, as I said, like you're exaggerating with that, but it's horrific. And to think that people who you personally admire massively, have witnessed that. It's just unbearable. I mean, you can't sort of put it into words. I mean, there's grown men there in South Africa. South African men, I'm not sure if you know or not, but they are incredibly proud, and it's all about eating meat and going hunting for for their food to put on the barbecue, that sort of thing. It's all about big cool things. But with big South Africans, they don't admit to crime or anything like that. But there were grown men in absolute tears and absolute floods. Those animals that they've looked to protect for all the years that they've been there, for the entire lives of those rhinos, they'd seen one of their rhinos absolutely slaughtered. And it was one of the most devastating things I've ever witnessed. And you'll find that only one person on that reserve will talk about what happened. And I'll elaborate back onto her a little bit later on. And she's the one who tells this story and allows people to spread it. And I feel very privileged to be allowed to share this with you. With regards to the poaching, it's something that is very difficult for her to share. And the fact that she's allowed me to do this is obviously quite a thing, and I'm sort of really flattered that she's let me do it. So then we move on to Charlie. Charlie was the youngster. He's a year old. Obviously, he witnessed this. He witnessed this actual poaching happen. So he saw absolutely everything. So you can imagine the guys sort of coming to see the carcass as it was for the first time. This rhino saw it happen. He saw he saw the horns taken off. He saw the aftermath. He saw the poachers come in. He heard the bullets. Sorry, he heard the guns. He saw the bullets going. He saw the axes. He saw everything. He saw his mum crying after she had her horns taken off in absolute agony. That young rhino witnessed everything, and was just traumatized. This young rhino was left without a mum, and it was orphaned. It ran and ran and ran, fled the reserve. Now, Cheeky Cow has a sibling, a very incredible animal called Charlie. Charlie is a bull. He's a big male, really impressive male. Now, bulls are supposedly meant to be incredibly dangerous animals. They will charge at you if you're not careful. Very big, proud bulls, and they are solitary. They are very, very rarely, except for mating, will they gather together with females, or if they are together with females, you'll find that they are the ones who are being completely dominant. Now, this animal, Sweet Chili, should be trying to kill this animal. He should be trying to kill Charlie, because he feels like, he's overstepped the boundaries. Again, got to think Charlie was a male as well. This animal looked after that poor animal. It stayed by its side and basically was a dad to Charlie, and looked after that animal while it was still sort of trying to recover from some sort of, that trauma. But Sweet Chili stayed with that animal. And it's always thought that rhinos can't show or don't show any sort of form of emotion or compassion, anything like that, which, as we all know, with obviously reptiles that we keep, but everything has a personality. Everything sort of has their own unique feature or their own unique sort of part of them that that we can recognize them for. And again, with Sweet Chili was a very gentle animal, and something that a bull should not be. Bulls should be bolshy. They should be trying to gain dominance and fighting between each other. But this animal was just interested in protecting Charlie, which is a truly incredible thing to see, and something that any rhino person that's been spoken to, any higher up in national parks, have ever witnessed anything like that. And it's unique. And to this day, Sweet Chili is still alive. And Chili did witness this to a point as well, and witnessed the aftermath, saw the carcass. So what you find with Sweet Chili is, if we're driving around on patrols, Chili has got this situation now where you can't drive past him without him looking up. He will always look up at you and to make sure you're okay. He's an amazing animal that shows compassion to anybody. He's not selfish. He'll look after you if you need it. He always wants to be the one to look after you. It's something that was incredible for a poached mother of a calf to be able to witness that. Now, sadly, Charlie did pass away eventually. After, I think it was 3.5 months, Charlie passed away. The sister of Cheeky Cow, who's called Rain. Rain is still alive now, living fine, and has had 4 calves since the poaching in 2014. Rain took on Charlie as well, and Charlie was suckling from Rain, so seemed to be doing well, was taking milk still, and was learning to graze as well from her surrogate mum, if you want to call it that. Seemed to be doing really well. Now, the problem is with rhinos, when rhinos are developing, you can't physically see their body condition. You can look at a rhino and they might look chunky, look nice and healthy, that sort of thing. Like you can, again, I can relate to reptiles. They've got a big chunky belly. Generally, you don't really see the spine, that sort of thing. But with rhinos, again, you can't sort of make that judgment just on that. Now, this animal was starving. This animal wasn't taking enough milk. Wasn't grazing enough. Looked perfectly healthy on the outside, but on the inside, it was starving to death. There was nothing in there that was maintaining weight. The milk obviously wasn't sufficient enough, and the grazing material wasn't good enough for that animal. It was too young to realise exactly what it needed to be doing. It didn't have a mum at the end of the day. So sadly, Charlie did pass away, and therefore was the second victim of the poaching. And moving on those, we then have Winnie. Now, Winnie was also shot, as an older female. Winnie was shot and was near Cheeky Cow at the time this happened. Now, when Winnie was shot, she ran away from the site and escaped the poachers. Just kept running and ran to the other side of the reserve. She had 2 bullets found in her when she was found. She had one found in her rump, and the other one was found right in the middle of her lung, and she died due to a puncture to the lung. It's it's another painful death, very slow, painful death. So another animal that has really suffered massively, but not actually poached. And the biggest upset caused by that is that she was heavily pregnant and she had a fully formed calf within her. So with Winnie dying, you can technically say that two more rhinos died there, which again obviously was a horrific blow for the reserve. And also obviously the loss of another loved rhino in Winnie was devastating. And finally we move on to quite arguably one of the most impressive rhinos I think I've personally ever seen. I was very lucky to actually witness this animal, and again I would say about anything like we would with all of our animals, but Patrol was my favourite rhino, and you know, he always will be, and you can never replace him. Incredible animal, stroppy animal. If you sort of do anything slightly out of line, or you try and go a bit too near to him, he will charge you. And the reserve manager, who is now in his late 60s, who was in his late 60s at the time, he's now early 70s. I've never seen him move up a tree as fast as I have in my life. A thorny based acacia. Never seen him go up a tree as fast as I have in my life. Charged by him. Patrol used to do it. It's a bit of a game. But he was an incredible animal. As you can see by that picture, the size of that horn. The poachers didn't get anywhere near that animal. He wasn't actually involved in the poaching himself, that incident at all. So he didn't actually deal with that. But he's still classed as a victim of the poaching, mainly because he died during the first dehorning. And that's something that I'm going to elaborate on a little bit further down the line. Now, this animal, as I said, was the first one to be put under an anaesthetic to be dehorned. Unfortunately, the reversal didn't work effectively, and he didn't actually wake up, which is obviously one of the, again, incredibly difficult for the guys to take, because this was the next year, the following year after the poaching happened. It was then almost like, here we go again. We've lost another rhino. mainly again because of the need to do something to sort of try and counteract the potential of more poachings. So we've almost had another one die. We've had another one die here as a result of the original poaching. And again, I didn't witness it myself. I wasn't there, but from what I've been told by people who were there, it was a case of where trying to bring that animal alive. You can imagine, you know, when you're trying to resuscitate a person, trying to do it to a rhino. They were saying that you had 10 sort of big South African men jumping up and down on that animal's lungs to try and get that animal to come back alive again. They didn't even think of the prospect that that animal, if that woke up, that would probably kill them. It would flip over and probably kill all of them. They didn't even think about that. Their first thought was to get on top of that rhino, jump up and down, and try and start its heart again. But it didn't work, and sadly, Patrol passed away, which obviously is incredibly sad. But I feel very privileged to have been able to see that animal. Over 2 years, I saw him for 4 weeks in total. Over the 2 years I was originally there as a uni student, and obviously it's one of those things that you just got to take those memories and try and look at the positives from that animal. And now moving on to what they have achieved now, and what we actually do to try and protect them, which I'll now move on to.
I'm Linda Tavish. I'm a private rhino owner and operations manager on a reserve in South Africa. We've had rhino here since 1995, and in 2014 tragedy struck and we lost 5 of our rhino to poachers. This was probably the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to myself and the other people that work here, and we had to make the very difficult for rhinos. It was nothing we ever wanted to do or even considered doing, but on that day when I saw the mutilated faces of our rhino that had been poached, the decision was made for me.
There's a controversy between dehorning and horn trimming. So people tend to call it horn trimming now because people see dehorning is taking the horn off, which we actually do, but they connect it to cattle dehorning, where there's a lot of blood and stuff going on in adult cattle, which is not the case in rhinos. Use a drop of butorphanol, which we give directly intravenously once the rhino is down, and that counteracts these respiratory suppressing effects a little bit. You'll see normally we mark it as about 4 fingers from where the horn and the skin meets one another. About 4 fingers from there, that's where your growth plate stops. And if you do it correctly, there's no detrimental effect to the animal. It's not painful at all. It's like clipping your nails because you're above the growth plate. So there's no bleeding. You can see that there's no nerve ends that's stimulated or anything. And then we do shape it around, and it's a lot easier for it to regrow normally back out again. So
we didn't want to be irresponsible in just trimming their horns, so we have, through the Earthwatch Institute, we've conducted a 3-year research project looking at the impacts of trimming the horns. How does it affect their behavior, their reproduction, social, foraging, everything, and we found absolutely no negative impacts.
After the procedure is done, we wake them up with a drug called naltrexone, which is a complete antagonist. And after they're up, 2 to 3 minutes, they're fully awake, they're happy.
A horn is worth about $250,000. So if you leave it on a rhino, you're signing its death warrant, and that is a decision that I regret until I die, that I never dehorned them sooner, because they would still be alive if I had.
To trim the horns or dehorn the animals, you definitely buy time. It is a deterrent. It's not to say it's the begin all and end all, and if you dehorn your rhinos, they will never get poached. But it gives you time as a lot older, whether you're a reserve owner or a rhino owner, that you can focus attention on other stuff as well.
Sadly, there's less than 4,000 black rhino and less than 20,000 white. They are on the path to extinction, so we have to consider every possible way of saving them. Since we have trimmed their horns and removed that risk, we've also strengthened our anti-poaching unit. So the combination of both has thankfully kept our rhinos safe since 2014. My hope is one day the rhinos can walk around with their horns again, but until then, we have to fight and do whatever we can to save the few remaining rhinos.
Okay, Daryl, we have a couple more questions for you again after that video.
Yeah, go for it.
I'll go first. This is regarding the actual dehorning itself. I know on the previous slide we talked a bit more about making them obviously the horns legal and more ethical type of. I don't really want to use it farming in a way, but if we actually remove the horn, is by removing the horn and obviously deterring the poachers because it becomes like the animal will become less valuable to them. Does it actually affect their natural behaviours in the wild? Because obviously, you know, like most male, I'm assuming this, most male mammals, like they would use their characteristics, their horn for fighting over territory and for females. And if it's actually removed, does it actually affect their social behaviour with each other, interactions or anything like that?
Just a good question. To be honest with you, yeah, that's something that quite rightly we do hear a lot, and yeah, it's something that before it was put into place of dehorning, it wasn't like a rash decision to just let's just take the horns off and hope that works. Something that had been thought about for a long while. So I don't want it to come across as if it happened and the reserve thought right, let's do it, let's just get them off, sort of thing. It was something that was considered and had been considered earlier before actually the poaching occurred. But yes, research has been done into it, and the reserve is heavily involved with something called Earthwatch Institute, which are based predominantly in America, but also Brighton University in the UK. And together they run a series of scientific tests when dehorning is done, and then also after dehorning is done. One of the workers out there, one of the employees out there, actually is doing a PhD on rhino behaviour, and that's something the volunteers get involved in there, studying the rhinos constantly. And yeah, as you quite rightly said, they're looking into social interaction and sort of any issues with potential mating. Now you find males will generally confront each other when it comes to breeding, but again, the main time that you'll find them confront each other is when they're juveniles or sub-adults or just hitting the stage where they're looking to want to reproduce, and that is when they're more likely to be shown some sort of aggression towards each other. Now, generally, aggression to a female is not really something that's seen between a male and a female. The male will pretty much just come and do the job and bugger off. To be honest with you, that's how it works for him. But with regards to social interaction factor there, from what we've found and all the studies that have been done, and I will say this every single day, when they're driven around and fence patrols or whatever, whenever a rhino is seen, data is taken from that animal, where it's seen, what that animal is doing, the time they're being found there, who they're with, it's always recorded. So any form of sort of behaviour that's not normal is recorded. But again, we've seen bulls together, sort of trying to confront each other, but they will still go, you could literally say head to head. They will literally still do that. Horns, you'll generally find the horn don't really come into play. If you ever see a YouTube video of anything of two rhinos sort of going together. You never find the horn is really used as a form of line of defence. It is almost just a thing that is there. Obviously, you'll find there's situations where maybe sort of to get through like bushy areas, they might use it to help move away from, move like branches away from the actual body of the animal. But generally, there's been absolutely nothing that has been found that has been detrimental to the animal itself. And also, I want to stress as well, we've also taken a lot of testosterone recordings and a lot of stress sort of related recordings that we can take in involving temperature, blood pressure of the animal, heart speed, that sort of thing is all taken when the animals are dehorned. So you can see at the minute in that second picture on the right, you can see there's a couple measuring the horn there, measuring areas of that animal. And that is done head to tail, it's done for the horn, that is done for the ears, done for everything to see if it's affected them with growing up in any form whatsoever. And there's been absolutely no evidence of anything that's detrimental to that animal. And again, I'll stress that if there was any form of detrimental factor for dehorning, it would be stopped and we wouldn't be dehorning anymore. At the end of the day, we're looking out for the welfare of these rhinos. Obviously, keeping them alive is what we want to do. And yeah, if there's no detrimental effect on the rhino, then this is something we will continue to do for as long as is needed.
So what happens with the horn once you've taken it off?
So the horn, again, that might sound like a bit of a ridiculous question, but it's spot on, really. I mean, the horn, you'd think, right, okay, great, we'll now give it to the Asian market. They've now got what they want. We'll get a bit of money in. This is where it gets very frustrating with South Africa itself. So the trade in rhino horn is illegal. Now, when you hear me say it's illegal, you're probably thinking, oh, great, that's brilliant. We're not going to trade the rhino horn. They're going to stop it from going places. That's great. We've banned it. But actually, when you're saying that, like Lynn quite rightly said in that video you just saw, allowing those horns to be present and not be able to go anywhere, you're basically removing something that poachers want. Now, there's less and less opportunities for poachers to find them. They're more and more likely to go and try and poach. Now, the horns that are taken off, the horns that are taken off of the animals on this reserve here, they are all taken and stored in a vault. Nobody knows where this vault is. Even the majority of the employees don't even know where this is, but they're all taken, put into a vault, and because the rhinos are technically owned by the reserve, they own the horns. So they've got a lockup which is full of horns, and it's owned by them. And they've got 23 rhinos now, 24, they've just had a calf. 24 rhinos there now, so you could arguably say there's 18 horns there from the last 6 years now. For the last 6 years, there's a lot of horn there, so there's a lot of money's worth of horn. Now, as you quite rightly said, the ideal scenario would be to sell on the horns. Now, obviously, that is a logical thing to do. Now, with regards to looking at how that can be possibly done, now, the issue that we've got is there's a lot of corruption within South Africa and within the South African government especially. Now, the ideal factor would be to lift the ban. Now, if we lift that ban, that basically will mean that there's no income coming in from South Africa because the government are having a bit of money put in their pocket to allow these syndicates from Asia to plan poaching events, meaning that they're getting a lot of money out of the horn being removed itself. So they're lining their back pocket with a bit of money, allowing a bit of poaching to go on, and then the horn's taken over to Asia, and then they get what they want. Now, if it's legalised, the people who are going to be benefiting from this legalisation are going to be the reserve owners. Now, if it was legalised, the reserve could sell the amount of horns they've got there. So I could easily say there's probably about 70, 80 horns there. And obviously you're talking white rhinos have a small and a large horn. So there's a lot of money's worth of horn. Now, if that was sold to the Asian market, the amount of money we could use there to put better fences up, have drones to patrol with, improve the facilities for the APU, the anti-poaching unit, with regards to what we can give them while they're out and about. But there's so much we could do with that money. And again, national parks and other places could really, really benefit from the money of all the stored horns that when people have dehorned. But at the minute, they're literally just hopelessly stored in vaults where nobody's got access to, gathering dust, not doing anything, where rhinos are being needlessly poached, so the horn is illegally taken, just for the government's pleasure of gaining a bit of money and fulfilling the need of the Asian market. So yeah, it sounds very simple just to lift the ban, which we all want, meaning then if we did lift it, as you quite rightly said, the word farm isn't an issue at all, because that realistically is what we'd be doing. So it would be a case of having the rhinos within the reserve, allowing them to live freely, but just removing the horn and giving it to and selling it off to the Asian market, meaning it is a bit of a win-win. So the Asian market are still getting their horns, but we're calling the shots with how much, you know, we're charging for it. They're not having to hire people to do the poaching, and obviously the other plus point there as well is that we're still having the rhinos alive. At the end of the day, we want the rhinos alive. Granted, without a horn is not ideal, but it's still a rhino. At the end of the day, we've still got the species, and once the market is flooded, the hope is that potentially there's an aspect that we can look at them not being dehorned. But that is, you're talking in the distant future. The rate of decline at this moment in time, I really can't see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah. Right.
I've got one more question.
Yeah.
I'm assuming males and females of the whites and the blacks, they both have similar size horns. What ages would you be looking at, like, trimming the horn? Like, so do you normally wait till they're like an adult and they've got quite a good sized horn, or do you sort of take it in chunks? As soon as like the calf starts developing horns, then would you start taking off little bits?
Yeah, again, a good question, really. I mean, it's a horn's a horn at the end of the day. Now, dehorning is done once a year. It's split over about 5 or 6 sessions. We try and do 5 at a time, so 5 per day. It's a really stressful day. I've been very fortunate enough to have participated in 2 horning sessions, so I've been involved in 12 dehornings now, and it's one of them where the horn is taken off of any animal that's got a horn that needs to be taken off. In other words, there's any form of growth above the growth plate. Now you can see again in the right hand picture, you can see again where that young girl there is actually measuring. You can see how sort of flat that horn is there, or lack of horn is there. That is as low as it needs to go, and as you can see on the left hand side, you can just see there's still a little stump there. Now that rhino hadn't even had its horn taken off at that point. Now you can see it looks very small, but there's about 5 inches there of horn that is taken off. Now that rhino has had 5 inches of horn grown in the last year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you put it into perspective with regards to if we allowed our fingernails to grow for a year, and you think of actually how much they would grow in relation to that, it's actually a substantial amount. So yes, as soon as the calf is a decent size, I mean, I would don't sort of take this as gospel, but I would say 9 to 10 months we're looking at taking off the horn, because they'll start to sort of, as soon as they start gathering a little point on the end, like the actual horn point, then we know it's got to be done. We had a rhino last year called Storm, who was actually my favourite animal, my favourite rhino on the reserve. He actually had an actual horn last year. He had a proper curved horn, so it wasn't like a stump. And he was one of the ones that they wanted to do first. He ended up being the last one we did, mainly because we couldn't find him. In going around the helicopter, we couldn't find the damn thing. Then we finally did and took it off, and the horn was massive. I mean, you can imagine from, say, your elbow up to the top of your forearm and touching like the tips of your index finger. It was that big. It was huge. And that's for a calf that was, well, I say calf, it was now, at that point, it was 11 months, maybe just pushing a year. So that's a massive horn for a tiny little calf. But yes, as soon as we see a horn of some sort, something that we can take off, it is taken off. All right.
Definitely. I mean, we can carry on from there, because I'm sure the next questions are going to, I don't want to ask too much and then they also get answered during your presentation.
No, that's fine. I mean, the next one's here, a few more pictures here of horn trimmings. As again, you can see there's a few pictures here relating to on the left hand side. You can see the vet there who has, it's literally just electronic saw which you buy from B&Q or something. That is what it is. That is their equipment, and it is used to cut through the horn. I want to stress that it has no form of pain at all into the animal. The animal is not suffering any form of pain. It's literally just like getting some nail clippers and taking your fingernail off. There is no, it's just like a little procedure like that. That is it. That is all it is. But it's actually, because it's bigger, it needs an industrial instrument to take it off. So the saw is used. Then what's then taken out around the sides of it is, as again you saw in that last video just gone, a grinder is taken around the outside, so it encourages a shape in order for the horn to grow back properly. If you leave it quite sharp, then sometimes you'll find the horn will go a bit ski-whiff and doesn't sort of grow back correctly. So yeah, it's quite basic in the sense of how it's taken off. It's literally just a standard saw you find in B&Q, and it's just taken off. It's nice and quick and simple, and it takes maybe 30 seconds for it to be taken off, and then a little bit of time just to grind it round. You find the whole procedure takes maybe 20 minutes once it's all taken into consideration. All the aspects got to be looked at. Now you look at it as well, you can see the young girl on the left hand side there, sort of counting the things in the air there. Basically, she's got a hand underneath the nostril of that animal. She's counting the breaths of that animal within a minute to keep an eye on the breathing of that animal. So we have several teams. We have the first response teams. So the middle picture there, I was very fortunate to be allowed to do first response for the dehornings. You can see myself in the middle there. It's one of the most incredible things I've personally ever done. It's something you've got no control over what's going on at all. That animal's dictating what's happening. So at that point, the helicopter has put the dart in, and this is about 20 minutes after the dart has been put in. It's starting to lose sort of any form of on its feet. It's very unsteady on its feet, and you'll find that we have to support that animal. In regards to doing that, it's literally a case of holding that animal up. And to be honest with you, the amount of people you can see that are there, we still struggled. It's not easy to hold up one of those animals that weighs a couple of tons. It's a big animal, and basically when we do this, it's such a dangerous situation that we actually have to sign a form sort of declaring that we're happy to participate in the dehorning. And the one thing that is, again, might seem quite ridiculous saying this, but the most important thing is the rhino. So if something goes wrong with the rhino and you're crushed underneath the rhino, the first port of call would be to see if the rhino's okay. You would be second, which is seriously true. If that rhino was to land, I'll be completely honest with you that one of the first times we did that, I had no idea exactly what was it. He said, "Oh, just follow what we're doing." So I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." You get off the truck after sort of driving 80 mile an hour to try and find the damn thing. Get off the truck. So right, just push it forwards. I'm like, well, do what? You literally just go straight at the rhino. You're pushing on the rhino to stop it from landing on you. And you just said, step back as soon as it rolls. And I thought this was going to be something that happened quick. And it took me 40 minutes to put that first rhino on the floor. And I literally thought I'd broken my wrists because I've got like 2 tons of weight put on my wrists. And I was walking around like I had jazz hands because I couldn't move. Literally, it was ridiculous. But it was one of the most incredible things I've ever done in my life. But it's scary because you think, something could go wrong. That animal, like it's happened before where an animal has died. But once it's happened, everybody is, the adrenaline's pumping through your veins, and it's one of those things that you never forget. And it's one of the most, well, I don't even say one of the most, it is the most incredible thing I've ever done. And it brings tears to your eyes. When you talk about it, it brings goosebumps to your arms. It does. Even now, you just can't express just how important the job is, but you're actually participating in doing it. It is something that I will never forget. But yeah, so that is a dehorning. I'll just move on to the next slides. So just look at positives and negatives of horn trimming. So with some of this we've touched on already. So the first positive is it acts as a deterrent. So it's not something that is used to say, right, we're eliminating poaching completely. It is a complete deterrent to try and stop poachers from looking at an animal thinking, yeah, there's loads of horn on that, let's have a go at that one. If you go to a national park, you might find that the animals have significantly bigger horns. Now, I didn't touch this earlier on. I probably should have done. You'll find a lot of national parks tend to not dehorn their rhinos, which you might think, well, that sounds ridiculous considering they've got the most rhinos on their national parks or on their land. Now, the reason for this, which is understandable, and I can completely see why they have this conundrum. The first reason is because they have no government funding. A national park is a national park. They live on minimal stuff. Now, the government, again, don't help here as well. They pretty much think wildlife grows on trees. So they've got no interest in funding the animals, even though obviously animals are the most important thing for South Africa. With tourism, no animals and the country would have little income. So the national parks themselves, you'll find, will tend to not take the horns off. And you think about it, if you're going to South Africa or any country which has a rhino, as you know, do you want to take pictures of that animal? You think, God, I really want to see a rhino. And even if you go to a zoo, you think, God, I really want to see a rhino. And you see it and you think, God, look at that animal. It's got fantastic. It looks fantastic. It's got a massive horn. You know, it's really well built. It's a beautiful animal. Imagine seeing that without a horn and trying to take a picture of it. Now, if you're a lover of rhinos like I am, as far as I'm concerned, a rhino is a rhino with or without a horn. But if you're going there just as, you know, just a day trip and have a look at some rhinos on a safari or whatever, which is great, you're going to want to take a picture of a rhino with a horn. And that's why national parks don't do it. If they're dehorned, then they're going to lose some form of tourism. People aren't going to want to see a rhino because to them it's not a rhino anymore. It's just literally a grey lump with no horn. That is how it is, and you'll find that there's very little interest in taking a picture of one. So I think that is one of the most damaging parts of it, that they don't actually take into consideration what dehorning can offer. But then again, on the flip side of that, you can look at actually why they don't actually do it. And moving on from that, now I'll put potentially increases the lifespan of the rhino. That's maybe not worded quite how I'd wanted to word it, but if that animal is poached, then that is purely because the horn is there. You know, they want that animal. Doesn't matter how old that animal is, if it's 12 months old or if it's 35 years old, that sort of thing. A horn's a horn at the end of the day. So if we've taken that horn off, there's a less likelihood that that animal is going to be poached. Obviously, you get opportunist poachers where they come across an animal on the fence line and they think they can get a small amount of horn, then they will still go for it. But 9 out of 10 times, a rhino with minimal horn is going to be of little interest to a poacher. It's not worth the risk. So if you look at it along that sort of side of things, you could say, yeah, it does potentially increase the lifespan of the animal. Dehorned rhinos means less likely to be poached, which obviously then will mean the animal will live a much longer lifespan. Obviously with Cheeky Cow sadly passing away, she was 13 when she was killed. Being dehorned, like Lynn quite rightly said, that, you know, she regrets it as long as she lives. She'll never forgive herself, which is not her fault at all. You know, she will forever blame herself for the fact that she didn't dehorn the rhinos. But at the end of the day, in 2014 time, very few were dehorning rhinos. So that animal there, you look at and think she was 13 and she still could have had 2/3 of her life left. So that's why I put it potentially could increase the lifespan of a rhino. And obviously then I think we touched on it a little while ago with regards to saying no adverse effects from having the dehorn, the horn removed. And again, that is something that I'm sort of feel very strongly about, because quite rightly people are very much like, well, you know, does it not cause, you know, dominance issues, that sort of thing, which is very true, and I can completely see where people are coming from with it. But as I said, there are a lot of good scientific papers and studies that are being done, and it's not just with white rhinos, it's also with black rhinos and Javan and one horns around India area. They're all being looked at where dehorning is being done, and we've found nothing at all that proves evidence that it's got a detrimental effect on the animal whatsoever. So then let's quickly move on to negatives. So not necessarily negative such. I mean, it's deemed as controversial. So obviously, a lot of people are thinking, well, we're just taking it off with the hope of it we legalise and we can gain some money from it. As I've explained to you previously, that's not necessarily how it works. Obviously, the controversial factor as well. As I said, I touched on it a minute ago with regards to not being in place at most national parks. But it is controversial. I mean, you might have people come from all over the world who've never ever seen a wild rhino in their lives. And to be honest with you, when I first went to South Africa the first time, and I went to a national park for a day off, and if I would have seen a rhino without a horn, I don't know how I would have thought about it. You know, it's something that I think it's each to their own. I now go to again on our days off when we are at the reserve. We go to this national park, and again, for obvious reasons, you probably sort of think, why don't you sort of name the places? It's something that we don't do, mainly because of like social media, things like that. I know you never know who could be watching this. You never know who could see this in the future, or any of sort of posts I put online or anything like that. I will never ever mention the reserve's name or reserve name that's surrounding it. All national parks that are surrounding it, I will only ever refer to it as the reserve or a national park. But I look at when we went to this national park and saw the rhinos. Whenever I go there now, after knowing what happened with the poaching, and you learn more about what goes on, I see that animal and I feel scared for it. I look at it and I think, you look at that magnificent horn on that animal, you think, God. I don't look at it and think, that's incredible. I look at it and I think, you look at the dollar signs hanging off of the, hanging off of the horn. You think, God, I think the money that horn is worth, and that's the scary aspect of it. I shouldn't have to look at an animal and think, I'm worried for that animal. I think that animal, is scary. I'm scared to see it. I shouldn't be scared of looking at an animal. I should be in awe of it. But I'm generally scared of that animal now. To think, next time I go to the reserve, or sorry, next time I go to the national park, it may not be alive. Now I know within this national park, as I said previously, they've had a lot of poachings recently, but I may have seen one of those rhinos the last time I went there. I might have photos of that rhino. For all I know, that might have been poached. And that is the thing that is really hard to accept, that individual that you may have no sort of connection with, but you might have pictures of, and they may have been poached. So it's very much there are negatives, as I quite rightly said, with regards to the horn not coming off at national parks. But then again, there are people of all different sort of walks of life going there. It's not just tourists who go there. There's people who go, as I said, who own reserves or zoos, or who have general good common sense and knowledge of rhinos, who will go there and have different opinions on that. And again, I will stress that you'll find there are literally people who've worked with rhinos for years who don't agree with dehorning. There's some that do. So you can't please everybody, but it's each their own and what reserves feel is right. There we have it. Last few bits of additional work, which aren't related to actually dehorning at all. So while we have the animal under anaesthetic, we use other opportunities, these opportunities to do other things. So generally we'll do a general health check, make sure there's no knocks or bumps or lumps or anything obvious that could be causing issues to that animal. So it's something that is just quite handy to better do, so we can do it close up rather than do it from a distance with binoculars. We'll take fecal samples, and this measures testosterone levels, stress levels. You can get a lot of data from fecal samples. And again, that is done in relation to the Earth Watson Institution, looking at if there's any stress levels that are affected by the dehorning or by the lack of maybe the social interaction that might be affected. So that is why that's taken. Measurements are done of that animal just to make sure that animal is growing and developing nicely. That will also be from head to tail. That will also be like muscle mass per leg, the size of the horns, to sort of see the growth of the horn and see if it varies per animal. Maybe if the stress can affect the growth of the horn. Maybe it's another element that might be put into consideration there, or taken into consideration there. It's something that is worth looking into. If you've got an animal that has been anaesthetized, it's worth doing as much as we can. It doesn't matter what it is, it's worth doing. The last one there, which may not be familiar with you, is notching. And notching is something that is used within reserves. Several reserves do it now, and a few national parks do. Now this reserve does do that as well. Basically what it is you look at the ear of the animal. Now the ear will have a small little clipping taken out of it. And we do that to identify each animal. So every animal has a slightly different shape taken out of its ear. It's not painful at all. It's something that's like putting a tag or having your ear pierced, something like that. It's just taken off a tiny bit of the ear to create a shape. And each animal has a specific shape or specific symbol on their ear, so we can ID them. We carry ID charts with us. So if we see a rhino, we can get binoculars out, we can look at the ears, and we can ID who that animal is. So then we can locate them throughout the reserve. So then at night time, when we deploy the anti-poaching guys, we can locate them around areas where the rhinos were seen, so they are staying as close to the rhinos as they possibly can. It's critical that notching is done in order to keep an eye on them, work out who we have seen, and if there's any we haven't seen for weeks. If there's particular animals we haven't seen for 2 or 3 weeks, something that we'll do a mass search for. We'll see if we can find that animal. So notching may seem insignificant, but actually it is an extremely important aspect of rhino conservation. Now we move on to another aspect now, heading to a group called Rhino 911. Now Rhino 911 work very closely with the reserve and a lot of local national parks and smaller reserves around the same area. Now these are a very, very special group of people, and a very, very small organisation. This guy in this picture you can see, Nico Jacobs, he gave up a job in the city, a very well paid job in the city, to look after rhinos and do work with rhinos. They are his passion. He decided to stop earning as much money as he did, and now he does this, spends all his money on trying to preserve rhinos. Quite an incredible person. I'll now move on to a video which explains the work they do and the day-to-day struggles that they face.
Good evening, my name is Nico Jacobs. Please join me on our day-to-day lives in saving the rhino species of South Africa. Thank you.
Say something, I'm giving up on you. I'll be the one if you want me to.
Okay, got them. Yeah, you can just check. It's number 95 is the bigger one. Yeah. You can see that big. It's not big.
At the ravine, a beautiful cow and a calf. What more can we do? We need to protect these animals.
Say something, I'm giving up on you.
Adult rhino cow shot. This is where the bullet entry wound right there. And just look at this absolute devastation.
It was over my head. No, nothing at all. And I will stumble and fall. I'm still learning to love. Just starting to crawl. Say something, I'm giving up on you. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to you. Say something,
This little guy's mom was also shot. We just found her. She was probably shot last night.
and I will swallow my pride. You're the one that I love, and I'm saying goodbye. Say something, I'm giving up on you. something, I'm giving up on you. Say something.
I tell you, every time, Darryl, that video got me at the Manchester talk when we came up. It's just a touching video. One question that we have got is, and actually there's two. I'm going to join them in together because one is, you know, with thousands of miles away, how can we make a difference, and what would the reserve need from donations to be able to carry out, so an average cost a year to carry out their work?
Well, that is the killer question, really. I mean, we try and do what we can when we're at home. I mean, personally, I try and think of as much I can possibly do when I'm not there. I mean, I'll do anything to be there and try and do what I can. So I'll do anything to be there. But it's literally the biggest thing, as silly as it sounds, is awareness. It's not a money factor. It is getting it out there and getting it to the people who don't know about what's going on, which is fine. But to let them go away and want to learn more about it or want to spread it to people. Now, money is obviously massively needed. The reserves I touched on earlier on are getting to a stage now where it is hitting desperate stages. They've worked out the bare minimum they can survive on $10,000. They work in dollars, so that's about £9,000 a month, and that pays for all the reserves wages minus the guys who are the management. It excludes them, who are all working for free. So there's food for the guys and also money to pay the guys who do the anti-poaching work, conservation guys, that sort of thing. So it's made to pay them who do the big jobs as such, if you want to put that one on the front line. So ways in which, you know, we can help. I set up something which I called the Fuel Fund, where basically in South Africa you find to fill up a tank of, fill up your engine, a tank of fuel, costs just £15. That's just literally 15 quid will fill a tank of a Jeep or like a Ford pickup, a big beefy car that requires a lot of petrol and a lot of money in the UK generally. It costs £15 to fill up an engine, fill up a tank. Now a full tank can do a full day's worth of patrols, and potentially, if it's done properly, it could probably do a day and night, and potentially the next day as well. So it can do a lot of work. There's a case of encouraging people to try and, if they can, obviously it's a very difficult period at the minute for everybody involved, but to encourage people to try and see if they can almost just fund a tank of petrol. That is how it works. I mean, being able to, my target initially was to hit a couple of weeks, and with incredible people who have donated and been incredibly generous. The minute we're looking at about 9 weeks, potentially up to 12 weeks of paid for patrols now, which obviously covers the next 3 months, which potentially is life-saving. So it's something that a lot of people have put a lot of money into, and is quite incredible, to be honest with you. And I'm talking people who don't even know what the situation is, who just just sort of put money in without understanding what's going on, and it's just incredible. And it's just now a case of it's funding the wages and it's funding the cost of patrols, the day-to-day run of the reserve. It just needs to work under the restrictions they've got, really. And it's just setting things up all the time. Again, it's just fundraising. I mean, I can't be there, but I can try and do what I can when I'm not there. So the minute I've got a situation where I've making T-shirts and merchandise for the reserve and selling that to try and raise funds. Again, I've not announced it yet, but yeah, I can go into it at the end a little bit further on once we've finished the presentation. But I've also set up another fundraiser, which would be quite nice just to do a little bit on at the very end as well, which I'll announce then. But yeah, it's raising money for the reserve with regards to fuel and wages. That is what's doing it. And if you fund the fuel and the wages, that looks after the rhinos and potentially is life saving. That is that simple.
To be honest with you, Daryl, I think this is one thing. It was last November, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
I've said it to Kate. Up until I'd gone to that event, this hadn't even crossed my mind. So awareness is the key to getting the donations, I would feel.
Yeah, massively. I mean, you know, it's one of them where it sounds silly when you talk about it, when people say, oh, you know, what can you do to help? But money doesn't buy you everything, you know. It doesn't buy you success necessarily. It's reaching the right people, and then when you reach the right people, if they can help like that, then that's fantastic. But if they've then got friends of friends who could then help, you're spreading the knowledge, which is what's needed. And that's what's fantastic, to have the opportunity to do this, you know, for your group, for your society, because it's reaching out to people who don't necessarily know about rhinos.
Yeah, make sure you give us the links and stuff, and we will put them in the write-up.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, that's no problem.
For this.
I have a question in regards to the Rhino 911, the video.
Yeah.
How many rhinos do they save? Obviously, they get quite a few calls out. So obviously, with rhinos like that have been poached or orphans, what is the percentage that can actually be saved, or what they do save when they attend, or is some of them that are so badly mutilated that they have to then look at euthanizing them on site?
Generally, you'll find if they've found something which is generally, I think it's about 70-80% it's orphans. It's trying to locate orphans. They obviously have helicopter response, and the guys are called in to local reserves. They work in the area and national parks, and work in an area, not a massive area, because obviously the fuel cost for their helicopter is extortionate, but they do work very closely with a company called Baby Orphaned Rhino Sanctuary. It's a terrible name, such a mouthful. Yeah, and obviously they take any orphans to them now. But yeah, with regards to the success rate, if you want to word it like that, with regards to poached rhinos, it's not high, because when they get there, that animal is potentially, when it's been found by whoever who owns the reserve or whatever, it's not exactly it's very hard to sort of try and pinpoint what they can do, because that animal could have been suffering all night and potentially just die of stress, or it's at a stage where it's still alive but there's no way of that animal recovering. So I would say they're putting down more animals than they're saving, which is horrendous to sound, because it does make you feel like, well, why are they bothering? But you look at the ones that they do save, and that's why you're bothering to do it, and that's why they get involved. They want to do what they can to do what they can. But I will stress as well, they're not just there to take part in, you know, sort of looking out for poached rhinos, that sort of thing, and orphans. They're also there to support any injured animals that may not even be related to poaching, or situations where dehornings, they'll help at dehornings to dart them. They're also there just as support. So anything rhino based, they're there to support. I mean, like, we've had animals before that, I know it's sort of related to it. We had one that had a snare around its leg. Now, it's nothing too serious, but it was starting to get infected. So, you know, they just sort of anaesthetised it and treated it. And again, you find just genuine sort of situations where it might have tumbled and, you know, sprained its leg or something. They'll give it pain relief or something. So they also do treat rhinos which have like genuine issues that need to be treated as well. So we're looking into more of the work that they do. Now, as you can see, I have touched on that quite a lot. Now, They are the first response to poaching instances, and a lot of the time they'll arrive and it'll be a case of the rhino obviously is already dead, sadly, but they generally will be there to try and have a look at the post-mortem to see if they can find any evidence themselves and see if there's anything they can do to try and look at prosecuting if there's any way they could possibly do that. They work closely together with a lot of bigger reserves as the support. As I said, the money being pumped into national parks is minimal, so these are a group of people who do this sort of thing for free. The only money they ask for is if it's veterinary treatment, but they will fly in to help support reserves and rhino missions for completely free of charge. They're there for the rhinos. They're there to help protect them with the people who own them. That's how they work. As I said, they will transport any orphaned rhinos to the rehabilitation centre I just mentioned, and then they're left there with them guys to do their job. Now, they've sort of said that the success rate of keeping them alive, depending on sort of the health of that animal and the age is the main thing. You find if you get a lot of young orphans, sort of under 6 weeks, that sort of thing, then generally the survival rate is quite low, because obviously they're still heavily dependent on what I would call like proper milk, if you like. So we have formula that they use at the centres, but they do need a good couple of months worth of proper milk from their parents. So the success rate over maybe 6 weeks to 2 months, something like that, is a lot more. It's a lot higher, and they have had a lot of success, especially sort of as time's gone by and they've learned different methods of how to deal with poachings a lot quicker, and a lot more effective. So the guys are really working well, really working hard with the rehabilitation centres in order to try and treat and see if we can re-release potentially in the future. But as I say, re-releasing is tricky, obviously, with past trauma that they have suffered, and obviously they can become a bit too dependent on carers, especially if they have been with them for sort of from a long age, from a young age. So yeah, it really depends sort of rhino to rhino as to what the situation is really. And again, I suppose you could relate that to rescue centres with reptiles. You have to treat each case differently or separately. So now we move on to something that's a little bit away from actual rhinos to a point. So there's something here called hashtag Don't Let Me Go. Hashtag Don't Let Me Go may not sound particularly rhino based itself, but it's actually something that seemed to sort of explode a bit. It's a campaign that I actually set up myself, and it was designed to show some support and show some sign of unity against rhino poaching. I was inspired to sort of do it by Lynn, who is the owner of the rhinos on that reserve, and the extraordinary work that she has done. I've known Lynn now for 10 years, and even just from talking to her online, even if I'm not sort of ringing her, that sort of thing, you sort of in awe of the work she's done. And this campaign was set up sort of in her honour, if you like. There's a song that she used to hear, and it's called Hold Me Close Africa, Don't Let Me Go. And it's sung by a South African singer called Johnny Clegg, one of her favourite singers. Whenever she heard it, she used to relate to it. She used to call it her rhino song. She just used to like listening to it, and she has like a waterhole behind her house, which is in the middle of the bush, and quite often you'll find rhinos will go to the watering hole and drink from there at night time. She'd just have the radio on and listen to that song, and it reminded her of the rhinos. So I thought, personally myself, well, I could probably take something from that. So I thought, well, actually the phrase "Don't Let Me Go" actually sounds very apt for the cause. So you're almost saying that you don't want rhinos to go extinct. So it's almost like something like the rhinos are saying. So the rhinos are saying to humans, "Don't let me go. Don't make me go extinct. Don't give up on us," sort of thing. You can see below there's a couple of links I've put down there as well. If you want to have a look a bit more into it, once I've sort of finished this, go on to Facebook. It's Hold Me Close Africa, hashtag Don't Let Me Go, and on Instagram, it's hold_me_close_Africa. And have a look on there, where there's a lot of information fed through. Here is a very small amount of people who've taken part in the campaign. This is a very small amount of people. There's a little collage of people who have joined in the idea. Now, the idea was to get people to write hashtag Don't Let Me Go on their hand and basically say it, record themselves saying it. And it's basically saying that you're united against poaching. And it's just to pull together people from all walks of life, people who work on the reserve, who visited the reserve, people who are friends of friends who have been involved in some sort of shape or form, people who, who've never even known anything to do with rhinos, but know people who care for them and want to show some form of unity. So yeah, this is what we've achieved here. Got people involved, and now I'm going to play a video that was created to sort of bring together the awareness and what we've achieved here.
Next maybe a first burn starts.
Terrible to see these beautiful animals just hacked off senselessly for nothing. And this is what these people have to sit with every single day. We need more awareness out there so that people can help the trust and help the people get the right equipment and manpower to really make a difference. Look at this tragic sight. A mom and a calf killed senselessly.
Go Africa, let me grow old Africa. Remember me.
Don't let me go.
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 Don't let me go. No me busques. Don't let me go.
Sincere identity.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go. Stand to Halakatamaya.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go. Don't let me go. Don't let me go. Don't let me go.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go.
Don't let them go, guys. Don't let me go. Don't let me go. Don't let me go.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go. Don't let me go. Don't let me go.
Don't let me go. God, my new phone.
Don't let me go. Don't let me go.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go. Sono sincero individuo.
Hashtag don't let me go.
Don't let me go.
Don't let me go. Please protect our rhinos and let's create awareness to saving these amazing animals.
That brings me to the end of everything. So anybody has still got any questions, or if anybody needs a tissue again, let me know. And yeah, fire away, guys.
Well, we always need tissues for that, and to be honest, we've had everybody on the committee, rather than everybody jumping on, sort of sending through questions to be asked at the same time. One of them in there was, does anybody have any tissues? So totally touching subjects. We just have had one really testing question, Daryl.
Go for it.
What are the ecological benefits rhinos as a species, and what effect will their extinction have on an ecosystem?
Damn, that's a good question. Who's that from?
Jen. A question like that is always going to be from Jen.
Did she have to join late? Because I was expecting a different one, like does it bite or something? Not one of them. That was a good question.
I mean, you can answer the does it bite first.
Yeah. I think, to be honest with you, like when you sort of, like you say about the potential effects of them going extinct, the one I can think of especially is obviously when they graze a lot. Now, they graze and eat grass that a lot of species don't eat. So, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what grass they eat. My knowledge of grasses is shocking. But there are thousands of different types of grass in South Africa. Now, I know rhinos eat specific types of grass that a lot of antelope won't touch. Now, if these grasses, for example, aren't eaten, you'll find that they will take up obviously valuable space of other grasses that need to grow. If they're eaten, then the shoots obviously will be a lot smaller, meaning it will produce a lot more edible, sort of suitable, enticing food for a lot of other species. And then you can also go down a lot further down the food chain as well. Now you look at rhino dung as well. You've got a lot of things like certain species of dung beetle rely heavily on their dung. There are thousands of dung beetle species in South Africa. All of them have like dietary preferences, some of which heavily survive on rhino dung. So you potentially then could look along the lines of having, you know, dung beetles potentially going extinct themselves or struggling to find food. And again, there's other sort of things as well. Like you'll find rhinos will go around and they will knock down trees, which again doesn't sound like it's important, but that will allow shoots to grow through areas where like might be shading areas, that sort of thing. There's lots of things that rhinos do that go unnoticed, silly little things. Again, you relate to like an elephant. Elephants, especially with habitat destruction, they'll ruin bushes and that sort of thing. That you'll find that with white rhino especially, when it comes to grazing, they need to remove a lot of grass that is not eaten by a lot of antelope that need to, you know, that live in the same environment as them, like on the reserve. You know, if that's not eaten, or we've not got enough rhinos on the reserve to do that job, then a lot of the antelope would struggle. They wouldn't be breeding. It's as simple as that. But the other thing as well, which I mean, I get this one as well quite frequently, is what's the difference between a black and a white rhino? Because they're both from South Africa. This is related to that question. So black rhinos will eat branches and trees. They won't eat from the ground. They won't graze from the ground eating grass. They'll eat from trees. They have a forked lip, so whenever you see one eating, you'll see it's almost like, I always say it looks a bit like a tapir, but a lot smaller. So they all sort of grasp like from bushes, like acacia bushes, that sort of thing, and take small clumps of like tops of grass. Whereas white rhinos always have the head down and are always eating grass from the lower parts of the plains. So that's the difference between them. Now, if you haven't got black rhinos eating bits of acacia, which is almost a bit of an invasive species over there now, there's so much acacia over there, it's taken over a little bit. Now, if you haven't got species who want to eat acacia, then you've got a problem. And obviously then you've got an issue where you've potentially got grasses that could go extinct as well. So it's not just you're talking animals potentially, you're also talking complete habitats of other animals and ecosystems. I hope that answers it to a point.
To be honest, Darryl, I think Jen would have got out of what she wanted out of that. There was a point I wanted to make earlier, but I deliberately left it to the end. Firstly, and this, because we've been on a couple of hours, so we can keep this brief. You haven't just been in Africa for rhinos.
No.
You've also done some other work, haven't you?
Yeah, I have.
Would lead us on to another presentation along with this when we're up and running, if you wanted to give a brief rundown of what that presentation was.
That's fine, yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's fine. There's a lot of that data as well. So doing the rhino work at the same time as doing the project as well, which is an amphibian-based project, kept me busy. There's a lot of things to do. But yeah, a lot of multitasking. But yeah, definitely that's something that we can look at for sure. No problem.
Yeah, I know you said you'd done a lot of amphibian work whilst you're out there.
Yeah, lots of it. Yeah, very tedious but rewarding, for sure. I think the only other thing I wanted to touch on as well, just while I've got you on here, the other thing that I've set up, and it will be going live early June. I'll take the opportunity since this is going out in June, I believe. Am I right? I'm saying June?
2nd of June, I believe your talk was meant to have been scheduled for, and we'll schedule this for the same day.
Cool. Well, okay, that's fine. Yeah, basically, I've now got, it's based around rhinos again to a point. I've got a raffle up and running, which will be, as I said, hitting Facebook within sort of the first week of June, potentially the second week of June. And it is solely to hit your audience with regards to reptile-based people. It is a raffle where I've had a lot of brilliant prizes donated by some fantastic people who are friends within the reptile industry. And there's going to be tickets available for that, and I'm going to try and advertise as much as I can across Instagram and Facebook. But it is very much, it's not all rhino based. There's a lot of really good prizes on there that will be of interest to a lot of reptile people. I mean, if you've got a few minutes, I can give you a few examples. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah. Did we have a conversation about this, and did I send an offer?
No. That was quite funny, actually. I quite enjoyed that. So, yeah. So basically, prize-wise, as anything leading from, I've got Havistats, electric Havistats, Cuddly Toy Rhino, top prize, obviously. I've got Substrate. I've got Mercury Vapor Bulbs. I've got T5 Pro kits from Arcadia. I've got Reptile Systems domes, T5 bulbs. What else have I got? I've got experiences for zoos, day tickets for zoos, annual passes for zoos. I've got a signed picture of David Attenborough, legit signed by him. That's not some sort of a fake one. It is legit. I've also got a signed book, a Mantella book from Mark Staniszewski, which is now out of print. I've got a signed book from Chris Mattison as well. He's a well-known guy within the herpetology industry. Got a signed photo from Steve Backshaw as well. What else have we got in there? I've got another book which is handed down, which is done around. Have you heard of so Nathan Rusley? He's also sent through a couple of books for me to put through donations. I've also got down the other end, I've got a few bits and bobs like stickers and T-shirts. Got a couple of snake hooks from Mark Plymmer as well. So yeah, off the top of my head and what I'm looking at to the left there, where everything is, I think that's majority of stuff. But there's a nice selection of bits and bobs there, which hopefully will encourage people to. Oh, there's a couple of vouchers as well. £50 vouchers at some reptile shops as well.
Well,
So-
that's going to bring me on to another thing. Firstly,
Mhm.
Mike has said he's going to offer a voucher for the shop to you. So if you want to get in contact with Mike, and also which will be £50.
That's brilliant.
So we'll add in a £50 voucher at the shop, not a problem. And also membership for the society and merchandise, a T-shirt or a hoodie, piece of merchandise. We're happy to offer them in, because one thing I was going to say earlier is a hornless rhino is better than a dead rhino.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Totally. But yeah. I mean, I'll just quickly sort of put out. I mean, of any of them who are listening now, or whoever it does hit this, then obviously I want to thank everybody who has donated, because I have too many to list, but I will put them all listed on Facebook. But everybody has been incredible with stuff, and obviously again, thanks to you guys at the Society for letting me do this and for donating to that, and Mike as well for what he's doing there. It's brilliant. But even people I never thought would even send things through have sent through some fantastic prizes, and especially through the period that we've got going at the minute. I was shocked really as to what we've got. So if you're able to spare a bit of money with the option of, well, potential of winning some rather cool stuff, yeah, feel free to. Every single penny will go towards a reserve. None of that is for my back pocket. Every single penny goes there. At the minute, we've just hit £1,200 now. It's going to go straight to the reserve. And there's still, obviously, raffles not open just yet. But the target, you've got to be a bit mental with it. But my target is always going to be £2,000. If we can hit £2,000, then that will pay for 2 weeks full wages for every single member of staff.
No, Daryl, that really is fantastic. Remember to take our T-shirt money, but you have to message Kate.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. Yeah, that's no problem.
One question, final question, Daryl. Have you got any plans to go out next year or the next couple of years to review the situation again and do a bit more research into other topics?
I mean, yeah. I mean, again, obviously, it all depends on the scenario we've got at the minute with COVID-19 and how things are situated with that. But the hope is within the next year, I'm hoping to go out there again and continue the amphibian project that I've got on the go. As I said, we'll hit on that another point, and yeah, for sure we'll discuss that. 'Cause there's a lot of cool things that have been carried out there, but yeah, I'd like to go and sort of reassess that situation. But also, I sadly lost my cat last year, and it's got a situation where now my mum is finally available to leave for holiday or whatever. So hopefully, I'm praying next year I'll actually be able to take her out there with me, and just spend like a bit of a holiday out there. So I was hoping to go out there for my 30th in September, but obviously that's had to be put on hold now. So I think what we're going to do is have my 30th next year when I'm near 31, and sort of take my mum out there, and so she can actually, because all she wants to see is a wild giraffe. That's all she wants to see. And I said to her, "You'll see that every bloody day, everywhere." Yeah, just that's the dream really, just to get her over there and just do it really. It'd just be fantastic. So yeah, I'll go over there as much as I can. I mean, obviously with me frogs and everything I do here, I've significantly cut down my collection. Something I've said to you before, but I wouldn't change it for anything. To be able to do something which is worthwhile and real, if you like, something that's not necessarily just based around the hobby, which I love the hobby, but this is something that really needs addressing very quickly. And if you can do anything to aid that cause, then great. And I like to think I'm trying to do what I can do, and I may just be one person, but if you can share that awareness with one person, with one other person, then that's you've achieved what you want to achieve. You know what I mean? That's that.
To be honest, Daryl, you touched me last year, and I'm sure you've touched more people this evening, and when this video goes out, many more. So I just want to say a massive thank you for coming on. This has been it's a hard subject. I was looking forward to it because I enjoyed last year's.
Sure. I mean, I just want to quickly add on.
Sorry, I'm really trying to then come up with a closing speech, and Jenna's just says, "Sorry, Daryl." Sorry, when I was talking about being touched, Jay said, "I'd love to be touched."
I'll tell you what, though, I didn't want to say that. I was trying to stay all professional. And
I was trying my best, and I've just seen the message, Jen, every time. No, seriously, it was fantastic, and we will have you down to do this in person and have a room full of people, because I think it's justice, and I think people need to see this. And get behind it and get behind yourself with the work you're doing, because I'd only ever known you as the frog guy, before this, and I think that's what everybody knew you as. But this is just something else, something truly spectacular. As I say, last year really opened my eyes, and that presentation again, you've done it justice. Really touching. So one last thing from me and Kate as we're sat here and we're on record.
Yeah. Don't let me go.